Vince McMahon attempted to buy back the Netflix documentary. Plus, future plans for an NXT Championship have been revealed, and a new WWE signing makes their NXT debut. It's all in the Cultaholic wrestling news right now. Now available all around the world, Mr. McMahon, the Netflix docuseries that goes into the life and times of Vince McMahon, and it has caused quite a stir, in particular in the camp of Vince McMahon himself. We had a statement read out on the news this week from Vince McMahon, distancing himself somewhat from the documentary and the way that it was, as he said, selectively edited. But apparently he went one further than just distancing himself at one point.
He certainly did. Matthew Belloni of Puck News reports that after seeing early footage ahead of the release of the documentary, Vince McMahon attempted to buy the project back from Netflix. Matthew Belloni also adds that Endeavour CEO Ari Emanuel also voiced concerns about the documentary on behalf of Vince in regards to the treatment of his alter ego, Mr. McMahon, and sort of echoing the same stuff that Vince said in that statement you talked about the other day. It was also noted that Vince had Endeavour CEO Ari Emanuel, quote, chime in on his behalf, voicing concern about the doc's treatment of his alter ego. The offer was apparently rejected. They went, no, we're not going to sell that back to you, Vince. Sorry, mate.
The report also reveals that the docuseries itself was actually complete in 2022. But when the Janelle and Grant allegations around Vince McMahon came out, the documentary was revised to include it, as well as Mr. McMahon's retirement from wrestling shortly afterwards. And when you watch this documentary, they're very open about the fact that this was a documentary that was done and dusted until this additional information came to light.
Yeah, they say that in episode 1. There's like it opens with like shots of all the talking heads you're going to see and everything, a few little snippets from Vince that I think have been deliberately chosen because they age badly. He says like, I don't need to see the real me. Like he says that as if it's a bit that's going to be cut out, but they keep it in. And then there's a disclaimer on the screen. It says, you know, the majority of this interview footage was captured before the allegations surfaced. And then I've only watched episode 1 currently. We are going to cover it in a video later today. Everything that you need to know, which I've seen you've got in the notes to plug there later on. But there's definitely a cut point. There's definitely a point where it's gone, right, this is the new intro that we needed to do since the allegations came out. And now we're into Vince's young life and the explosion of wrestling in the 80s and everything. And it's like, oh, right, this is a bit that they haven't tacked on the front of it, but they've included because they had to.
Yeah, that's it. And we're going to obviously break down everything that you need to know from this documentary. 6 parts available now on Netflix. We're going to talk about it in great detail in a video later on today. Meanwhile, when it comes to Vince McMahon behind the scenes, post-wrestling reporting today, there's been a shake-up with Vince McMahon's PR team, hasn't there?
Yes, they say Vince McMahon is no longer being represented by public relations firm Citric & Company, post-wrestling has learned. The firm's exit from McMahon's team comes 5 months after the working relationship began and just before the Wednesday premiere of the Netflix docuseries.
They've got a bit of a reputation, professionally have Citric & Company, for crisis management operations, previously representing celebrities like Kobe Bryant and Roy Disney and brands like Pepsi. Post ads in April, Citric emphasized that his firm took on McMahon's case after conducting its own due diligence and worked closely with McMahon's legal team. We don't know at this point. Post hasn't yet been able to decipher whether or not this was a decision made by the firm or by Vince McMahon. But of course, when we know more about that, we will let you know more about that as well. It's going to be, it's an interesting watch, is the documentary. There is a lot to get through in it. And there is stuff in there that, as you said, Jack, doesn't age well. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff that, regardless of what happened with the allegations, really pretty grim viewing. I'll be honest. There's a couple of what may be perceived as some throwaway lines in there that are actually quite telling of the man behind the eyes.
Well, once I've caught up, we'll have to talk about them all in that video later on today. I will note that it'll be interesting to see the response that comes out from this documentary in the future, because you're going to have 2 different sets of responses. Responses from people like us who are wrestling fans, know wrestling, know what's been going on over the years. And I don't know if much of it, some of it will probably surprise us, but I don't know if a lot of it will. Then we'll get the response from very casual or even non-wrestling fans who are going to watch this, like we all watched Tiger King during lockdown.
Yes.
If I was a member of the Tiger community, then I would probably think, that documentary didn't even go deep enough. There's so much weird stuff left uncovered and unexplored. And that might be how wrestling fans are feeling about this Mr. McMahon documentary now. Whereas the wider world might look at it and go, oh my God, like how didn't we know any of this? So even though it might not go deep enough, as some people have suggested in the early days of its release, for the wider population, it may well have done enough. So we'll have to wait and see.
We will let you know more a bit later on today. On to last night's NXT. We had the debut of a new signing, which we will get to in just a moment. But last night we had a title match set for NXT show in St. Louis, which will be the second NXT show on the CW.
Yes, we certainly did, because after you might have seen his crisis of confidence last week, Tony D'Angelo has now been granted another match with Obafemi for the NXT North American Championship. As Tom said, that match will take place on October 8th in St. Louis, Missouri. He was put through his paces by the D'Angelo family in a slightly or very Rocky-style training vignette, and I want him to win. I want him to do it. Come on, Tony.
We were very much on the side of Tony on the podcast last week.
Oh my. I've done a total 180 from Obafemi's the best, he should destroy everyone. And all it takes is for one mobster to admit that he has a heart and that he's afraid. And I want him to just have the world. I just can't wait for Tony to win, because he definitely will. They've done a good job. They've sold the match to me, Tom.
He is basically, this is the week of the lovable evil mobster, well, the release of the Penguin series and Tony D'Angelo's rise to glory, standing up to Obafemi. I don't think he's going to win. It would be nice to see a big win for Big Tone, but I think you keep the belt on Obafemi probably forever.
I think that if I was a wise man, then I would keep the belt on Obafemi. But I'm predicting, at least with my heart here, and I hope that Shawn Michaels is booking with his heart. I don't know why I doubt it if he's got one. And I think that Tony, I just feel, and I could look like a real fool here in hindsight, but I think there's just something different about this storyline, and that Tony might do it. I don't know. I just feel like if he tries really hard, he might win.
That is great advice for anybody today. If you are struggling, if you try really hard, you might win.
Unless you're against Obafemi, then you probably do.
I like how Obafemi just breaks people physically and emotionally. That's kind of his thing.
Yeah.
When people realise that actually the NXT North American title is held by a brick wall. So, like, what's the point?
How do they... But I'm trying to think, how do they get Obafemi to, like, the main title in NXT or to the main roster? He
just wins it. He keeps the North... He just collects them all.
To be fair, he doesn't necessarily have to drop this belt, does he? Or they could say, like, to go for the main belt, you have to vacate this. Well, he doesn't have to lose to progress up the card. But I just, part of me just wants Tony. I just want Tony to do it.
Oh, we'll find out in St. Louis. We'll meet you in St. Louis. Meanwhile, last night's NXT set the stage for the first CW show in Chicago with a press conference between NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez and the top contender Julia. However, the closing moments saw the NXT on-screen debut of the latest WWE signing.
Yes, it was none other than Stephanie Vaquer, who briefly had a very well-received run in AEW, then decided, I'm going to jump ship straight away, and has now bolstered the already very impressive top of the NXT Women's Division. She appeared on the screen and asked Roxanne Perez and Julia what they were going to do, knowing that no matter who wins, they have her waiting on the other side of their title match. This is her first NXT appearance since signing with WWE over the summer. She made her in-ring debut just a few days after signing, but that was part of a live event in Mexico City, and the sudden nature of her joining WWE meant, of course, that she was stripped of both the CMLL women's and women's tag team titles. She was a big deal in CMLL. She was well on her way to becoming an instant big deal in AEW, and then she decided, I'm going to go to WWE straight away.
Get me to that shed immediately. Mm-hmm. Get me in the shed. So whoever wins between Julia and Roxanne Perez was setting up for a match with Stephanie Vaquer. And I think I'm intrigued as to how this is going to go now. I could see them putting the belt immediately on Julia and then give us this veritable dream match between Julia and Vaquer. But I could almost see Roxanne Perez sort of weathering a few more storms as champion.
If they booked Roxanne to beat both of these, then she'd be bulletproof. Like, she'd be very, very strongly booked indeed. I would hazard a guess and say they'll probably give the belt to Julia straight. They've just presented her as such a big deal since she's come in. It could always end in a non-finish and set up like a multi-woman match. But there's various different ways they can go, and I think they've set themselves up very nicely with these multiple options.
We'll be setting up later to watch you on Twitch. You Twitching tonight?
Myself and Owen, twitch.tv/Cultaholic. Last week, Tom, even though I was starting to lose faith, I think it's fair to say.
You were down in the dumps. You were the Tony D'Angelo of Championship Manager.
Like Tony, football manager. Like Championship Manager. That's old school, though. That's very good.
Look at me being old.
No, it's good.
So were you good on Sensible Soccer last Wednesday or not?
We won. We got promoted. We won the playoff final. Birmingham City, the Birmingham Swans, are now in the Premier League, but we might have secured a bigger job elsewhere. We're going to look for a different club. Yeah. Because we got them there, and then the chat started saying, "Oh, are you going to stay with them for another season?" And me and Owen were like, because we've done so well with Birmingham, we've overachieved. So now we might, I don't want to say use them as a stepping stone, but we might jump to a bigger club now.
Will you call the other team the Swans?
Yeah, they're always the Swans
They'll always
now.
be the Swans.
I hope we end up in a team who are already referred to by a different animal, like if it's Crystal Palace, we're the Eagle Swans, something like that.
Or if you end up in Swansea.
Oh, the Swans.
Swans.
Wow, Swan squared.
Oh, you can watch Jack and Owen playing Dino Dini soccer on the SNES tonight at twitch.tv/Cultaholic from 6 p.m. BST. And for the latest wrestling news at any time, you can check out cultaholic.com. Stay safe and fly, Swans, fly.